As with sending the message, of course, we now have to work in our message service again, where we get the messages. Now, get messages no longer works like this. I will no longer simply get my messages array. Instead, here I want to reach out to my backend and get the messages from there. So let's overwrite this and access HTTP here again. I will return it because again, we will just create an observable. But here, of course, I need the get method since we will send a get request. The URL is the same as above, so you may just copy it from there. It's /message at the end. I don't need to send a body here because I'm not sending any data in the request body. And I also don't need to set up headers because again, I'm not sending any data, so no need to set the content type. I do want to transform the response though, so I do need the map method. Here I will get back my response, of course, of type response as before, but now it's more than a one-liner, so I'll add a function body here. First, I want to retrieve my messages, like this, messages. I can retrieve them from the response with the JSON method and then access the object field. Remember, this object field here is the field I'm setting up here when I'm getting my messages and setting up the object I'm returning. If I were to rename this to messages, then I would have to use messages on the front end as well. But here it's object. So these are the messages I got from the server. The issue is the messages on the server do have different fields than the ones I need on the front end. If we have a look at such a message object, you see we get this __v thing, the _ID thing, and well, that's not really how our front-end message looks like. Instead, our front-end message should look like this: content, username, and possibly a message ID and user ID. Now, in order to achieve this, I need to transform it here. So first, I will create a new array, name it transformed messages, which will hold my, well, transformed messages. So this will basically be an array of messages. So let's import messages and of course set type message array. And it will be an empty array at the beginning. Next, I want to loop through my messages in this messages constant here. So here I can simply say for let message of messages. This for off loop is ES6 syntax supported by TypeScript. So here I can loop through all the messages in the array, and then for each message, I want to say transformed messages push. So push it on this array of transformed messages, and here simply create a new message like this. This new message will then hold the content, which I can extract from the message I'm currently at in this iteration. And here the content field. I also want to store the ID. So message ID is the next field I want to extract. And for username and user ID, I'll pass dummy and null for now, because I don't have that. I don't use users yet. So with this loop, I'm looping through all the messages I get from the server, I transform them, and I push them onto the array, transformed messages. As a last step, I return this transformed messages array, because my map function here needs to get something returned to it, kind of, because again, behind the scenes, it will automatically create a new observable which holds these transformed messages. Because always keep in mind, we are subscribing to an observable in the end, so map needs to give us an observable. It does this behind the scenes, but it needs to have something to work with. And this is what we return here, our transformed data. Next, I will also add the catch method from above to handle any possible errors here. Now with this, I'm extracting my messages. It's now, of course, time to also use them in my components. So in the message list component where I get my messages, we no longer assign them like this. Instead here, we need to subscribe to our messages service. And what I want to do here is in the success callback where I get my messages, and I know this will be of type message array, of course, because this is what we set it to in the transformed messages array we created in the map method. So here, what I want to do is I want to set this messages equal to messages here. And this parenthesis should be placed here. Now to keep this application in sync back in the message service, what I will do is here in the map method, for example, I will also set this messages, so in this service, equal to the transformed messages. So that the array I'm returning here and I'm using the component is also the same due to it being a reference type as in this service. This will become important later on when I start accessing messages from other methods. Like later on I will access them from the add message method or delete them and so on. So with this, if I rerun the build process, since it quit due to some error here, if I rerun this, also make sure to restart your backend server since we made some changes there. And thereafter, let's reload this application. We already see the test we created before, so fetching does work. Now the username is missing, and that's just happening because I have a tiny mistake here when I transform my messages. I'm assigning the message ID to the username field and the dummy username to the message ID field. So I'll quickly revert or switch these two fields here. So with this now, if I save this, let it rebuild, and then reload the application, we should see dummy here. And the part where we store the actual user, that will follow in the next section. For now, we got a working mechanism to save and fetch messages. The next step, of course, is to also be able to edit them.